Hi, I'm Leanne from Bat Lady Herbals, and welcome to my video. Today we are in Central Florida, and I wanted to introduce you to a plant that grows pretty wild here along roadsides and in a lot of people's yards, and that is pokeweed. Now this gorgeous plant comes with a major caution. That is highly toxic. Even though it's highly toxic, it's one of the most well-known traditional food plants of the Southern Appalachians. Before this plant gets to be 6 inches tall, which this one is much more than that, you can actually harvest the leaves and stems, boil them at least 2 to 3 times, discarding the water in between each boiling, and eat them. The stems kind of taste a little like asparagus, and the leaves taste a little like spinach. And they're a staple of the diet of the native peoples in southeastern United States from before the colonists ever came here. This particular pokeweed is Phytoleuca americana, and it is native to the southeastern portion of America, North America. Its native range reaches as far north as the Carolinas, as far south as Central Florida, and stretches along the Gulf of Mexico into Texas. Now, in addition to being an important food source for the native peoples around here, it's also an important food source for birds and small mammals. As you can see on this one, there's not a lot of berries left. A lot of them have been eaten by the songbirds, at least the ripe ones have. Now, the toxins found in this plant are specific to mammals, which is why the birds can go crazy and eat the crap out of this, but we have to be very cautious with it. Some small mammals actually have a little bit of a resistance. Some of these include the red and gray foxes found here, as well as possums. But for the most part, it's very dangerous for mammals to consume. Now, this plant is considered a shrub, and it will only get up to 8 foot tall. So you can see this one's got a pretty darn good start on that 8 foot height. But this plant is about 2 years old, and they do live quite a few years longer. They're also an important plant for quite a few of our butterflies. Now you can see these leaves, some of them have been chewed up by caterpillars, and I wouldn't be surprised to find a chrysalis or two somewhere in here. Later on in the summer, we'll see a whole bunch of little butterflies flying around that called this plant home and food. Now, this particular plant has quite a few cousins that grow all over the world. One in particular has made its way into Chinese medicine. In the TCM world, it's called Shanglu, and it works as a blood purifier to detoxify your system, especially when there's stagnation in your chi. Shanglu is known to work on the liver, spleen, small intestine, and bladder meridians. And it's specifically good to clear up stagnation in your liver chi. But here in America, it also has ancient traditional uses in medicine. The Cherokee would take the leaves and boil them with lemon balm to help treat a cold, specifically a cold that comes with a cough. It helps to generate phlegm so that you cough all of that out and you feel better. One of the ways Cherokee would use this plant is they would take a decoction or a tea made from the leaves and the roots, and they would use it to treat what we now know as breast cancer. But they also would use it to treat a certain type of pain that happens in some women in their breasts after childbirth. The root is the most toxic part of the plant, but it's also one of the more potent medicinal parts of the plant. With careful use, the root has traditionally been used to treat skin conditions, rheumatism, stagnation in your lymphatic system, and as an endocrine balancer. It helps to balance the hormones in your body. Now, some of the traditional use of that has made its way into the modern era, where today it's used by modern herbalists to help with hormonal imbalances revolving around fertility. It's used to treat infertility, it's used to treat low sperm count, prostate issues, and impotency. Some traditional uses that we have kept up with also use a decoction from the root of this plant as a substitute for antibiotics to fight infections in the kidneys and liver. And it's also used as a blood purifier. Now, I mentioned that this plant is highly toxic. One of the effects of the toxicity is that it is a violent purgative, which means that it will make you purge everything out of your system from the mouth and the rear. It is specifically used in a lot of traditional methods as a purgative for these properties. But you have to be very careful with the dosage, because if you give someone too high of a dose, it can be fatal. The older the plant is, the more toxic it is. The plant is only really edible to us before it reaches 6 inches in height. And then it's only the leaves and the stem that we can eat. The most toxic part of this plant is the roots. And most of the time, people that accidentally harvest the root think that it looks like a horseradish. And that's how it's confused quite a bit. But the most common thing that I have seen this plant be confused for is elderberry. These berries, when they're ripe, take on a dark purple color and look almost like blueberries, similar to what an elderberry does. But you can see the growing habit of the flowers and berries of this plant. They all grow kind of into a spike. And this is the key to making sure you don't misidentify this plant as elder. Elder flowers and berries grow in an umbra. So if you think of an umbrella, which has that same kind of sound at the beginning of it, umbra, all of the berries and flowers on an elder grow in that shape of the canopy of your umbrella. And that is how you know that it's not poke, that it's elderberry, is the shape that grows in. Not only is this plant toxic if you take it internally, but the sap can also cause major skin irritation in people, especially those with sensitive skin. Now there's another traditional use for this plant that's a little bit on the safer side. And this plant produces a very interesting reddish pink pigment. The berries were typically crushed in early Americana and rubbed on someone's lips to be like a lipstick. Now, you don't want to lick your lips till it's dry. And even then, you want to avoid that at all costs. But it was traditionally used as a lip stain. However, it was also used as a fabric dye in the Civil War era. You see this beautiful red stem? This is about the color it would have. And you simply take the berries and you ferment the berries. If you ferment the berries by themselves, you have a pinkish red fabric dye. But if you ferment them in a pumpkin, you get kind of a reddish brown. There's a couple different applications for these dyes and a couple different dyes you can get. Because this is a traditional plant, there is some information that you can find in books about how to eat it or how to use it. A couple books I recommend. Miss Peggy Lance has written Florida's Wild Edibles. And in this book, she actually details the best way to harvest and cook this plant without accidentally poisoning yourself. And then one of my favorite herbalists, Matthew Wood, has written a series of books called The Earthwise Herbals. He's got one that's on Old World plants, so Europe, and then he's got this one which is on New World plants, which is in the Americas. In this book, he actually talks about how to identify when someone might be in need of this particular plant. And he describes that as pokey, or as a lazy teenager. So people who come in from their day and just flop down on the couch or bed and spend the rest of their afternoon apathetically lazing around tend to be on the pokey side of things, according to Matthew Wood in this book. And these people may benefit from the endocrine regulation or the lymphatic motion that this plant can provide for them. So thank you for joining me today as I've introduced you to one of my favorite Southern Appalachian traditional plants, pokeweed. Once again, I'm Leanne from Bat Lady Herbals. If you like this video, feel free to subscribe. Hit that notification bell to be notified of any further things I post. Find my blog at batladyherbals.com. If you'd like what I do and would like to see more, find me on Patreon. I'll put the link down below. And please become a patron. Also, there are a few things I have up on Teespring. I'll put the link for that down as well. But have a wonderful day.